As some of you know, my wife and I were at Eastern Europe for the feast this year, for the Feast of Tabernacles, as we were 6 years ago. And 6 years ago, we came home from the feast, and one of our attendees, we found out, was severely ill. And several of us had gotten to know this gentleman from Topeka, Kansas, while we were at the feast. And we had, and Paul Erbaum and his wife Kathleen were there. It was 2019, and we got to know them more than we would otherwise because we spent time with them. And one thing we've noticed was that Paul was always a gracious and kind fellow during the feast. And one of our meals, his wife mentioned that Paul was the nicest man she had ever known. Well, she married him, and they had 5 kids, and it was a delight. Well, he was tragically ill shortly after the feast 6 years ago, and then died 6 weeks later. And so he was initially thought he was stricken with pneumonia, but he was suffering from an aggressive form of cancer that would take his life, and you could count the number of days. Well, my wife and I drove up to the funeral in Topeka, Kansas, and on the evening of the viewing at the funeral home, the receiving line extended outside of the building. There was a long row of building. I don't know if any of you were there, I don't recall, but it was standing room only in the facility. Now, Paul Erbaum was a high school teacher, and at that evening at the funeral home, his superintendent had a glowing commentary about Paul on and wrote it, and it appeared on his obituary page on the internet and the newspaper. And the superintendent of the school district was not a church member, but a big school district in Topeka. He said Paul was everything a Christian could hope to be. Whoa. Well, the funeral itself the next day was standing room only. I counted 160 people inside the main hall of the funeral home. Others were standing along the walls and in the foyer. And during the funeral service, several of Paul's children spoke fondly and at length about their father. Paul's brother and sister reiterated how nice of a man he was. And Paul's school principal spoke of his outstanding qualities. And one of his students from 40 years before spoke about Paul's patience and gentle nature. Well, as we walked away from the funeral service, several of us wondered, how could we ever measure up to the Christian example by the late Paul Erbaum? We all felt how much more we have to do to be considered an exceptional, likable person. Well, today I want to bring to mind this title for this subject is, Are We Likeable to God? Are we likable to God? Now, I stumbled across an article in Forbes magazine that explored reasons why some people are particularly likable. And that goes without saying, there's some people that are particularly not likable. But this article was dialing down to analyze what makes some people more likable than others. So I'm going to do this in reverse order. I'm going to go, they have 13 habits of extremely likable people. I'm going to start with number 13. Now I'm going to quote the late Don Pierwitz. Just because I'm giving you a list of things does not mean that each one will be at the same length. So if you're calculating 10 minutes on the first of 13 and you figure we won't get out of here till dark, you might want to just letting you know ahead of time that you don't want to do. Some will be shorter, some will be longer. Too many people succumb to the idea or the mistaken belief that being likable is just a natural, unteachable trait and only belongs to a lucky few. And perhaps they're good looking, they're very social and incredibly talented. And it's easy to fall prey into the misconception. In reality, being likable is under our control, and we call this, it's a matter of emotional intelligence. And so there was a study conducted at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. And what they did is they rated 500 adjectives, descriptive words, based on their perceived significance to likability. Which ones do you associate? Which descriptors are enhance likability? And the top-rated adjectives had nothing to do with being gregarious, intelligent, or attractive, which are all innate characteristics. Instead, the top adjectives were sincerity, transparency, and capacity for understanding. Well, these adjectives and others like them describe people who are skilled on the social side of emotional intelligence. There's an employment agency called Talent Smart, and they took the research data from more than 1 million people to show that people who possess those skills, meaning the social side of emotional intelligence, aren't just highly likable. They, on the job, outperform others who don't significantly. Well, if we take a look now at these 13 behaviors that make emotionally intelligent people, what makes them likable? Well, number 13, I'm going to put down, they ask questions. They ask questions. The biggest mistake people comes when listening is that they're so focused on what they're going to say next or what the other person's going to affect them that they fail to hear what's being said. We're going to jump to Luke 11, starting in verse 9. And the words that they may hear come through loud and clear, but the meaning is lost because people are too busy thinking of a response rather than asking any further questions. People want to know that you are listening. And something as simple as asking a clarification question shows that not only are you listening, but you care about what they're saying. You're actually taking the moment to digest it. And you'll be surprised how much respect and appreciation you gain simply by asking questions. Let's turn to Luke 11 and verse 9. I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. Let's go on to verse 10. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. In other words, you aren't going to get anywhere if you don't ask. Now, I've had sales jobs in small and big companies, and I've been a sales manager, and I've had to explain to salesmen, you have to ask for the sale. You've got to actually, try to gain a commitment. You can't just walk away saying, well, they never said anything. Well, you didn't ask. And so let's turn to Matthew 7, verse 7. Matthew 7, verse 7. We read, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. Verse 8, for everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. You ever walk up to a house, knock on the door, and somebody comes, if they're there, right? What if you just go stand at the door and never knock? You're not asking. You're not inquiring. We turn to Proverbs 8 and verse 17. In Proverbs 8, 17, I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently will find me. Requires some seeking. And is it casual? No, it says diligently. In other words, an active seeking. So, in this case, to be friends, you want to actively seek the truth of someone if you want to be considered likable. You want to know more about them. What are their concerns? In Jeremiah 29:13, we read, and you will seek me and find me when you search for me, there's a condition, with all your heart. So are we seeking God, and are we doing it casually or with our whole heart? So if we want to be likable to God, what should we do? Ask questions, search, seek, and do it with our whole heart. So that's point number 13. Let's go to point 12. Now, this one's not directly in the Bible word for word, but the principle is. Number 12, they put away their phones. I've never read anything in the Bible about a cell phone being mentioned there, but we're going to turn to Psalm 119, starting in verse 69. Nothing will turn us off more in mid-conversation and if somebody sends a text message or we glance at our phone and we're interrupting the communication between us and someone else. Like, my phone is more important than whatever you were saying, so you'll just have to hold on here. Now, there are interruptions and there are legitimate times, but when you commit to a conversation, we focus on the energy on that conversation. I remember a time back, I asked the barber a question, my barber, when I went to him, and he said, and it was something about relationship with the clientele, and he said, when I'm with a customer, everything else doesn't matter. I'm totally focused on that customer. I thought, well, that's pretty profound. I wish other people would have that same approach in service. But conversations, when you focus your energy on a conversation, the conversation will be more enjoyable and effective. If we turn to Psalm 119, verse 69, the proud have forged a lie against me, but I will keep your precepts with my whole heart. So somebody puts themselves into it, their whole being. They're not being distracted. Now, the point 12 here is put away their phones. They're not going to be distracted by some shiny thing that will pull them off to one side. In Psalm 119, verse 145, we're already on Psalm 119. In Psalm 119, 145, I cry out with my whole heart, hear me, O Lord, and I will keep your statutes. So the psalmist here is putting their heart on the line, seeking what God desires. We turn to Mark 12. In Mark 12 and verse 28, we can explore this idea of the conversation of what's happened here. In Mark 12 and verse 28, one of the scribes came and having heard them reasoning together and perceiving that he, meaning Jesus, had answered them well, then asked him, which is the first commandment of all? Verse 29, and Jesus answered him, the first commandment of all is, hear, O Israel, Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There's no other commandment greater than these. And of course, we know that basically that summarizes the first several of the commandments and the last several of the commandments. So verse 32, and the scribe said to him, well said, teacher, you've spoken the truth, for there is one God, and there's no other but he, and to love him with all the heart, with all the understanding, with all the soul, with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself is more important than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices. Verse 34, and when Jesus saw that he answered wisely, Jesus said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. After that, no one dared question him, meaning Jesus. Jesus pointed out, people are distracted by what? Things that are not as important as loving God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and strength. And he was saying, you're not far from it. In other words, you're on the way for that target. You're not distracted. So number 12 is put away their phones, meaning let's not be distracted in our pursuit, not just with the relationships with other people, but not be distracted with our relationship with God. Point number 11, we're counting down. We've had 13 and 12, now point 11. They are genuine. They are genuine. Being genuine and honest is essential to being likable. No one likes a fake person. People gravitate those who are genuine because they know they can trust them. It's difficult to like someone that you don't know and who they really are and how they really feel, because likable people know who they are. They're confident enough to be comfortable in their own skin. And by concentrating on what drives you and makes you happy as an individual, you then become a much more interesting person if you attempt to win people over by making choices that you think people will make them like you. In Psalm 34, we read starting in verse 12, Psalm 34:12, who is the man who desires life and who loves many days that he may see good. Verse 13, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. That's in the King James Version, it says guile, keep from speaking guile. Verse 14, depart from evil, do good, seek peace, pursue it. In other words, you want to build trust, to be trustworthy. To do that, you have to be genuine. You can't be making up stuff as you go along, hoping for the best. In Psalm 32 and verse 2, Psalm 32:2, blessed is the man to whom the Lord does not impute iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. That's in the New King James. In the King James, it will say, in whom there is no guile, which means in the heart to deceive. What do we live in now? A lot of people are running around, especially this time of year when the spam calls come in and they want to sell you a new medical plan. I get these calls all day, every day. And if anybody who's close to Medicare age, they know how it is. And they will be constantly barraged with those. Do they have credibility? No, they don't know me. They don't care about me. But they would be quite willing to siphon my wallet. Turn to Revelation 14 and verse 5. Revelation 14, starting in verse 5. Actually, I'm going to jump down in this story. Revelation 14:5, and in their mouth was found no deceit or guile, for they're without fault before the throne of God. So it's important to be genuine, to be open, to be honest, to be genuine, so that people do not have their hesitation up about you. Is he really? What does he really think? Am I being deceived here or what? And the same thing is true. We have to be genuine before our God. That's number 11. Number 10. There's two parts to number 10. They're both the same. Number 10, they don't pass judgment. If a person is likable, they don't pass judgment. I'm going to put parentheses, not quick to condemn. Because judgment is often used, the word is condemn, and it's translated as judgment. So if you want to be likable, you have to be open-minded. And open-minded means you're approachable and interesting to others. No one wants to have a conversation with someone who already has a formed opinion about everyone, is not willing to listen, and what you say is irrelevant. So we don't want to be like that. So having an open mind is critical in the workplace, where approachability can mean access to new ideas and help. And to eliminate preconceived notions and judgment, we must see the world through the other person's eyes. Well, that doesn't mean that you have to believe what they believe or condone their behavior. It simply means you have to hesitate and stop passing judgment or condemnation long enough to understand what makes them tick. Only then can you let them be who they are to understand someone else. In Proverbs 14 and verse 29, in Proverbs 14:29, he who is slow to wrath has great understanding, but he who is impulsive exalts folly. Ouch. So I should best be careful here. If I'm going to be impulsive, I'm being put in the category of a fool, exalts folly. But if I'm slow to anger, it means I have to be careful to analyze something, slow to wrath. Proverbs 15 and verse 1 and 2. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. What's easier to say, a harsh word or a soft word? Immediate response is a harsh word. A soft answer might take a moment of thought. In James 1:19, and we call James a book of basic Christianity, fits into the category of not being quick to condemn. In James 1:19, so then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. So we're considering carefully what we say and how we say it. And then one more proverb, Proverbs 18 and verse 13. Proverbs 18:13, he who answers a matter before he hears it, it is a folly and shame to him. That means patience. That means listening to get the patience Don't be condemning when you don't know the whole story. And so point 10 was they're not quick to condemn those people who are likable to each other. And as we want to be likable to God, whose fault is everything? Is God's fault for everything that bad happens to us? People are, it's phenomenal. I monitor in 4 different social media sites, and I try to restrict it, the broadcasting to people who might be like-minded, who are interested in marriage and family and values and so forth. But sometimes other people find these, and I just in the last 2 days have deleted over 40 hostile, vulgar, and obscene comments where people are busy condemning that which they do not know and do not understand. And so they are quick to condemn that which they don't understand. We don't want to be quick to condemn that which we do not understand. So point 10 is not quick to condemn. Point 9, as we count our way down, is they don't seek attention. In other words, it's not all about me kind of approach. People are averse to those who are desperate for attention. Unless, of course, they're 1.5 years or 2 years old and they're so cute you can't stand it. But those kids love. Had a kid in the grocery store yesterday. The kid was about 2 and was just enthusiastically wanting to get my attention and wave and say hi, practicing the new words. But if you're over 40, that probably doesn't work the same way. The people are averse to those who are desperate for attention, and you don't need to develop a big extroverted personality to be likable. You can be an introvert and be likable, but when you speak in friendly, confident, and concise manner, you will then notice that people are more attentive and persuadable than if you show them and act like you are the important one. People catch on to your attitude quickly, and they're more attracted to the right attitude than what or who you know. And when you're being given attention, such as when you're being recognized for an accomplishment, shift the focus to the people who worked hard to get you there. Now that may sound cliche, but if it's genuine, the fact that if you pay attention to others and appreciate their help, that will show that you are an appreciative and humble person, the 2 adjectives that are closely tied to likability. In Matthew 6, in verse 1, Matthew 6, in verse 1, we talk about humility here. Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you're doing something great, you don't have to point and say, look at me, I did something great. Oh, you-hoo. You don't need that attention for God to be likable to God or, frankly, likable to other people. In James 4, in verse 10, we are given this admonition. In James 4:10, humble yourselves in the sight of God, and he will lift you up. We don't have to blow our own trumpet all the time. This doesn't mean you shouldn't ever. There are times when you can call attention to something. But as a matter of principle and practice, that should not be your first go-to. In Proverbs 27 and verse 2, and this is we're on point 9 about likable people don't seek attention. In Proverbs 27 verse 2, let another man praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips. So that fits into the, oh, you-hoo, look at me, I want attention kind of thing. And there are, as we all know, there are people like that. But if we want to be likable, let the attention come from what we do and how we perform. Point 8. How are we doing with the Mr. Pierwitt's rule? Are we measuring them all out the same length of time? Number 8 is they are consistent. People who are likable are consistent. Few things make you more unlikable than when you're all over the place. When people approach you, they like to know that they're dealing with who they're dealing with and what sort of response they can expect. To be consistent, you have to be reliable. And to be You must ensure that even when your mood can go up or go down, it doesn't affect how you treat other people. Like, well, I'm having a bad day, so I'm going to make sure you do too. That's not the way to be likable. Psalm 33 and verse 11. Psalm 33 and verse 11. We read, "The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations." There's consistency here from generation to generation. In Hebrews 13 and verse 8, Hebrews 13 and verse 8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Verse 9, "Do not be carried about with various and strange doctrines." There's consistency. The truth is consistent. And somebody's always seems to be coming up with a wrinkle somewhere, sort of like from Ralph Giddens put this meme out that said that the earth is 70% water, therefore we know the earth is flat because the water is not carbonated. I mean, yeah. I mean, there are people that want to prove things that aren't so. Let's go to Ephesians 4 and verse 14. Ephesians 4:14. By the way, if you go to Europe and you get bottled water, it's either flat water or carbonated water. Here, I don't normally see carbonated water as bottled water on the shelf, but over there, it's a choice every day. Ephesians 4 and verse 14, and we're on point 8 about likable people are consistent. Ephesians 4:14, that we should no longer be children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men in the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting. Well, what does it mean, tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine? Ever been on a sailboat? What happens? What drives a sailboat? The wind. And what happens if the wind is coming from that way, but you want to go that way? Well, that's going to be a difficult challenge. You're going to have to figure out how to tack back and forth, how to take that energy and translate it. But some people are just tossed on the waves. As a young man, I canoed across Lake Tahoe. It was nice on one way going over, 5 miles across. The windstorm came up from the wrong direction on the way back. I know what it's like to be tossed about in the wind. But I survived it. So being consistent is a characteristic of being likable. Now, being consistently positive, I should say, is very helpful. Being consistently wrong or bad, that's not going to give you likability points. Point 7, they use positive body language. We'll turn to Ephesians 6 and verse 14. They use positive body language. If we are cognizant, if we're understandable about our gestures and our expressions, our tone of voice, making sure that all of those things are in a positive way, it'll draw people to you just like ants to a picnic. If you have all of those positive attributes, if you use an enthusiastic tone, maybe uncrossing your arms instead of and standing there waiting for somebody to challenge you, or maintaining eye contact, or leaning toward the person who's speaking, those are all forms of positive body language and that high emotional intelligence people use to draw others in. Positive body language can make all the difference in a conversation. It's true that how you say something can be more important than what you say. In Ephesians 6:14, stand firm, therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness. It's stand girded. In other words, being prepared for the truth. You're not waffling away, looking somewhere else, being unreliable with your body language so that nobody will trust you. So number 7 is using positive body language. Point 6, they leave a strong first impression. People that are like, well, I probably should replace the word strong because a strong word could be ambiguous. Leave a good first impression. Some people leave a strong first impression. My company used to be on the corner of an intersection. and it was a side street had stop signs. A through street did not. Not everybody stops on the side streets. And it would happen that there would be an angle impact at that intersection on a regular basis, and they would wind up in my parking lot, once wedged up against my front door where cars were, because people were not respectful. Each one of them left a strong first impression on me. Okay, so maybe I should rephrase a strong, good impression. Research shows that people often decide whether or not they like you within the first 7 seconds of meeting you. Whoa. Then they spend the rest of the conversation justifying their initial reaction. This can sound terrifying, but know that you can use this to your advantage by making gains in your likability. The first impressions are tied intimately to positive body language, a strong posture, a firm handshake, smiling, opening your shoulders to the person you're talking to help ensure that your first impression is a good one. In Ephesians 5 and verse 15, Ephesians 5:15, see then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. We live in a world that's very challenging. So we have to be circumspect. We have to be careful, knowledgeable, how we're approaching other people. It says right here, don't be fools, okay? Don't open yourself up to things that you shouldn't. But nevertheless, point 6 was to leave a strong first impression, as positive as you can. Point 5, likable people greet people by name. We're all in trouble now, right? Our name is a very important part of our identity, and it feels terrific when people use our names. Likable people make certain that they use other people's names every time they see them. You shouldn't use someone's name only when you greet them. Research shows that people feel validated when someone uses their name, or they reference somebody's name in a conversation to others. And what if you're great with faces but not with names? Well, you can have some fun with it by making remembering names a brain exercise. So when you meet someone, don't be afraid to ask their name a second time, because often we forget it right after we hear it. In fact, there's statistics on that. I don't know how many seconds it takes for us to dismiss it before we put it into chemical memory. But we'll want to use the name in conversation. Now, over the 2 decades of teaching, I've had thousands of students. And one of the challenges for a teacher is to remember everyone's name. So what I would do is every student, I required them to have a 3-ring binder. And on the binder, they would have their name right on the front of it. And inside, it would be a placard. And I would have that so that they would have a little name placard on their desk in front of them, so that I could use their name every single time. And it took time for me to be able to remember the names. And I remember it was at the beginning of the year. Now I've had students usually I had students 3 times while they were in high school, as a freshman, and then for U.S. history, and then economics and government somewhere in their 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. So everybody I had about 3 times in a smaller school. And so when I told the students, and then you get new students in every year. So at the first week of school, I say, as a teacher, I am committed to learning your name. This is in August. I will learn your name by Thanksgiving. Or if it was in spring and sometimes semester class in January, I say, I'm going to learn your name by spring break. One kid spoke in a loud whisper in the back of the room. He says, he's not kidding. It's a challenge to learn names. It's just one thing we deal with. And learning to be likable. In 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 11, I'm going to read this from the CEB, Common English Bible. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. So continue encouraging each other and building each other up, just like you're doing already. How do you reinforce people? Well, one of the ways is to use their name, to build up that relationship between and among people. So point 5 was greeting people by their name. Point 4, they smile. Wow, this is a big shocker, right? Likeable people smile. They do it naturally and unconsciously. Other people will mirror the body language of someone. Excuse me. If you're mirroring the body language of somebody that they're talking to, and so if you want people to like you, you smile at them during the conversation, and without realizing it, they will unconsciously return the favor, and they'll feel better as a result. In Proverbs 15 and verse 30, I'm going to read this in the New English Translation, the NET. A bright look brings joy to the heart, and good news gives health to the body. Kind of nice to have that uplifting look, that uplifting feeling. That's what helps make people more likable. Is that our same approach when we approach God? Are we smiling? Are we appreciative of what we get? Are we then becoming likable to God? We're in Proverbs now. Let's go to Proverbs 17, verse 22. In Proverbs 17:22, I'm going to read this in the Good News Translation, GNT. Being cheerful keeps you healthy. It is slow death to be gloomy all the time. Now that's a paraphrase, but it really boils it down to modern English. Because having that smile, that uplifting approach or attitude, doesn't just make you more likable. It's better for your health and better for your outlook. We're in Proverbs. Let's go to Proverbs 16 and verse 20. Proverbs 16 and verse 20. He who heeds the word wisely will find good, and whoever trusts in the Lord, happy is he. So let's use smiles as a tool for us to increase our likability for both other people and our likability to God. So number 4.4 is smile. Likable people smile. Point 3, likable people know when to open up. Likable people know when to open up. When you just meet somebody, you got to be careful not to avoid sharing personal problems and confessions too quickly, because this could get you labeled as a complainer, or one of those people. Remember, it only takes a little bit to have that good first impression. Likable people let other people guide when it's the right time to open up in a conversation. Now, we all know people who say, well, I tell it like it is. Well, those are the people that don't have a filter. And we can all explain the experiences that we've had with some of those. Because the people without a filter, and you first meet them, and they have no filter, and they tell you that you're dumb and ugly and your mother dresses you funny, that's probably not the way to be likable, okay? So it's important to use that filter to know when to open up and how. In James 5, in verse 16, in James 5:16, and here we're in James again about basic Christianity. James 5:16, confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. So there is a time when you do that, but you must establish that relationship before you're opening up to someone, before you're oversharing. Now, some of you may be familiar with Zig Ziglar, an author and speaker. And in his presentations, he's saying, we can share your goals, but you share your go-up goals with people who are surrounding you, who are your supporters. And you share your go-down goals, things you want to get rid of, okay, with everyone, because everyone's a sheriff then. If you say, I want to get rid of this habit, and I want to improve myself, but if you want to go, in that sense, to go down, get rid of something, everybody will be your police. If you truly want to get rid of something, but if you want to go up, you want to achieve something, you only do that to a smaller group of supporters. That was Zig Ziglar's theory. In Proverbs 11 and verse 13, in Proverbs 11 verse 13, I'm going to do this short verse in the Common English Bible, the CEB. Proverbs 11:13. A slanderer walks around revealing secrets, but a trustworthy person keeps a confidence. How would it feel if you told somebody something rather quickly and they told everybody they knew? How awkward is that? Does that make you likable? Don't overshare and you won't have it coming back to bite you. So the third point on likability is likable people know when to open up. Be careful of oversharing. Point number 2, likable people know who to touch and they touch them. Well, doesn't that sound odd? Who to touch and when to touch them? I know that before I believe I've spoken on the 5 love languages of people, and one of those is the sense of touch, how people connect. And some people, that's their love language. Other people, it's words. Other people, it's quality time and so forth. But it's interesting, when you touch somebody during a conversation and you release oxytocin in the brain, that's a brain chemical, which is a neurotransmitter in your brain that makes the brain associate you with trust and a show of other positive feelings. And it can be a simple touch on the shoulder, whether it's a hug or a friendly handshake. And that's all it takes to release some feel-good oxytocin. Of course, you got to touch the right person in the right way to release the oxytocin, because an inappropriate or unwanted touching has the opposite effect. Could even get you slapped or punched. The relationships are not built just from words, but also general feelings about each other. And touching someone is one way to show that you care. If we take a look at Matthew 8 in the first 3 verses, in Matthew 8, in the first 3 verses, we read that Jesus, when he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, you are willing, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Verse 3, and Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. What was a no-go in that world? You never touch a leper. It's unthinkable because it's transmissible. And it was mind-boggling for this to occur. But what did Jesus know? He knew who to touch and when to touch them. We're in Matthew. In Matthew chapter 8, let's go to verse 14 and 15. In Matthew 8, verse 14 and 15. Now, when Jesus had come to Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. Verse 15. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them. That's a pretty quick turnabout. But he knew who to touch and when to touch them. And then he actually did it. We have the other example in Matthew 19 about the blessing of little children. And what did Jesus say? He said, let them come to me. And what did he do? He touched them. He didn't hesitate to do that. What do you have? A little kid that wants to be close? Stand over there, kid. That doesn't work out for building that close relationship. So, likable people, they know who to touch and when to touch, and they touch them. And number 1 characteristic of likable people, they balance passion and fun. Now, these aren't in a priority order when I'm giving these to you. Just that happens to be the order in which I'm giving them. But likable people balance passion and fun. People gravitate to those who are passionate. However, it's easy for passionate people to come across as being too serious or uninteresting because they tend to get absorbed in their work. Likable people balance their passion with the ability to have fun. At work, they can be serious. They can still be friendly. Yet they can still get things done effectively in short amounts of time and capitalize on valuable social moments. Likable people minimize small talk and gossip. Instead, focus on meaningful conversations with their coworkers. Remember, they can remember what you said, what to them yesterday or last week, or that you're just as important to them as their work. And if we turn to Galatians 5:22, we read about the fruit of the Spirit. In Galatians 5:22, for the fruit of the Spirit is love and then joy. Well, how about that? Joy is involving passion and fun, as well as long-suffering, kindness, goodness, and faithfulness. So the likable people will balance passion and fun with the rest of their lives. So what are the 13 habits of extremely likable people? And that would be 13, they ask questions. They're curious and willing to learn. Not everybody knows everything. In fact, not anybody knows everything. Point 12, they put away their phones, or they focus on paying attention to others. Point 11, likable people are genuine. They're without guile or deception. Point 10, likable people don't pass judgment. They're not quick to condemn. Number 9, likable people don't seek attention. Rather, they demonstrate humility. Let it come to them naturally. Likable people, point 8, are consistent. Consistency brings trust and hope for future expectations of consistency. Number 7, likable people use positive body languages, just like each of us can position ourselves for success. Number 6, likable people leave a strong first impression. They suit up, they show up, okay, so that they're ready for the job. I remember I've hired a lot of people in the past, and then I've read a lot about how to interview people, and then how to prepare for interviewing for a new job. And I know that I said, dress like you're going to the job, when you're interviewing, as you're going to be on the job. Make that first impression that you are one of them ready to go to work. Number 5, likable people greet each other by name. They personalize relationships. Point 4, likable people smile. They let everyone know they're a happy person. Point 3, likable people know when to open up. In other words, they know how to be careful with their relationships. They gauge when it's okay to open up to some people. Point 2, likable people know when to touch, know who to touch, when to touch, and then they actually touch them, because they know that's a critical part of communication. And number 1, likable people balance passion and fun because they want joy in their lives just like we want joy in our lives. Well, in order to be likable for God, are we likable to God? Do we practice between and among each other so that when the time comes and the bell tolls, as the poet says, how close can we be? Will there be people lined up outside the building on our demise that says, you know what? This guy was such a good, he was the kind of Christian that everybody should be like. And we're all going, wow, when we think of Paul Urban. His wife comes here often during, or widow now, during Women's Enrichment Weekend. But I can't help but think of that, getting to know that, and that practicing, and you're going, you know what? He practiced all of these. That's what made him so universally likable. So we have to prepare each and every day for the time when we must come before the throne of God and give account for our lives. So let's ask this question every day as we start the day: how likable are we to God?